and it's not performing. That's what I had that earlier. Let's see if I can give this some sort of kick, because at the moment that's definitely not watchable. Something about the focus. It does not like something about the focus. Anyway, everybody, welcome to the stream and the very funny images that you were getting on screen. Hopefully the camera is going to perform this evening. Just try and decide where to put the light now. The camera's just repositioned. I managed to get an adapter. Well, an adapter got delivered for this snake, silver snake that I've got, which has allowed me to put the camera vertically above the work. And since I've done that, the camera's been doing that really funny thing you just saw this evening. Since I was rather late coming to stream because I was watching another excellent streamer, AD Fall Guy, who does chainmail. So I've been watching him for the last hour or so, and really enjoyed that. And then just set my camera, well, set the set up to broadcast, and suddenly realised that the camera was doing some really weird things. Yes, you do know Just Jessup. Welcome to the stream. Since you were also in there watching, and so am I actually. It's fascinating stuff, is chainmail, and as AD says, I'm going to have a go, but I'll do that at the weekend. I do have a kit which has arrived. I've actually got two kits that have arrived, which are going to act as Christmas presents. No, not Christmas presents, birthday presents, he says, reducing the volume of his voice so that it doesn't carry to the person whose present it's going to be. That's assuming I can make them. But I've also bought some of AD's bag charms as well. I got 4 of them. Really nice quality things, and well worth checking out his jewellery stuff. Right, so I noticed the background down there isn't quite smooth, and I'm just wondering whether I want to smooth it before I... yeah, I do actually. We shall hope the camera performs this evening. Also, I've got a new pair of glasses, and I've got to get used to those, which might be fun. They're a lot clearer than the other glasses that I was wearing, but I can't see the computer screen as well with them. Yeah, well, you never know. It's a good thing to get things like Christmas presents early, because you know how Christmas always sneaks up on you, and then it's, you know, you've got about 2 days to get Christmas presents in, and you're running around all over the place. So, but this year, now that I'm actually doing art, I can probably make Christmas presents. But yeah, just getting my words in a twist. That comes from thinking about one thing and doing a completely different thing at the same time. Yeah, maybe. Right. So actually, I'm hoping you guys, I've got a better view now, because you're virtually, or actually, hanging up right up above the the work. In actual fact, yeah, those of you, let me know. The image is left to right and upside down. If you prefer to see it as I see it, looking down, which actually might be better, mightn't it? Let me, just while I'm thinking about it, let me flip the camera. Probably wants to go upside down. Properties. So if I flip it that way and that way, you're now looking at it exactly as I do. So I'm looking down on, that's exactly the position I'm looking down. Sorry if that made everybody, just a little bit instantly seasick, but you're now seeing this exactly the same image that I am, and on almost exactly the same position as well. Since the camera is now about 3 or 4 inches in front of my head. Yeah, I did. I just flipped it in OBS. I wasn't particularly wanting to. Yeah, I did so. I wasn't particularly wanting to try and use the camera's own software if it was going to go weird on me like it just did at the start. There's just a rough bit of wood just in here, and before I start carving this top area, I want to just try and smooth out. It's actually a piece of torn wood. That's I keep banging on somewhat about cutting wood, not tearing it, and by some means I've managed to tear a piece. Probably because the actual the angle of the grain is weird around this bottom edge here. I think it probably dipped down, so when I was cutting the chisel it kind of ripped. Have a little bit of depth left to the height that I want it to go to, so it's not going to be a problem to smooth it off, but it does mean coming back this far almost to create a flat surface. Now, one thing you can, those of you who are watching, can keep an eye out for and let me know is if this camera is actually shaking as I'm carving. I noticed a little bit that it happened on the tripod. Well, this thing being on a long snake, I'll either be less affected or more. I'm not quite sure which. If it's more affected, I'll have to see if I can mount it elsewhere, and then that way it won't be affected as by me moving the desk as I do when I'm carving sometimes. "3D Bloke, good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. I'm hoping it's you. Mic's on. Phantom power's on. Mic's plugged in. Let me just check that OBS hasn't picked the wrong mic up, I guess. Settings. Video, audio. Oh no, it hasn't. It's picked up the right one. Yeah, I was about then to think I picked up the wrong mic. It's slightly directional. Is that any better? Mind you, this mic has got quite a wide. I haven't adjusted the mic. The camera's been playing up a bit tonight, but that's is it me? Oh, I think what I'm going to have to do after this stream then is I can turn that 1, 2. Something's off. Hang on a minute. 1, 2. Yeah, something is off. The preamp is now turned right up, but watch out for clicks if you're wearing headsets. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got the gain of the preamp turned right up. It's not clipping, but okay, it looks like I've maybe got a bit of a. Let me turn that down a bit. Yeah, normally I'd operate it somewhere around there, no, a bit further down. Somewhere around there. So it looks like possibly the switch on the mic was just a bit dirty. So hopefully, mind you, yeah, I'm not the preamp's not showing much, but OBS of course is telling me I'm getting a decent output. Oh dear, I'm going to have to reboot my whole system, I think. I don't. It doesn't get rebooted very often, but with the camera playing up, the microphone, which I actually think is probably just the mic switch. Normally what I do is I turn the mic off at the end of the stream and kill the phantom power at the same time. Maybe I'll just leave it running. Right, nearly there. Thank you very much for letting me know. I was going to start this stream by carving the dragon itself, but there's just an area back here which you can't actually see too easily on the camera, but that's got yeah, it's wobbling, isn't it? Oh dear. Maybe what they're looking into is the fact that now that suddenly what is it? Giant Waffle is streaming in creative. A lot of people are suddenly in an area that they weren't expecting. I mean, what was it last night? Something like about 15,000 people in creative, of which 14,950 were on Waffle's stream, watching him put together plastic kits, Warhammer kits. Dear. and whilst I was watching it, most of the time, most of his chat was reminding him to put the top back on his glue bottle. I'm not sure, but I think he was using a cyanacrylate adhesive as well, so it's kind of like, hair doesn't affect this stuff, or not very much, but yeah, tell us if that wobbling gets a bit too excessive for you tonight. If it does, I'll transfer the camera back to a tripod, and I'll see if I can mount the snake in another location. I've got a sort of a desk to the left of me that isn't in contact with this one I'm carving on, and so I can probably try mounting it on that, and hopefully avoid the wobble. I'm sort of trying to give you a better position, and also so I don't have a tripod sat in front of me or to one side, which makes it a better experience, not a bitter experience, a better experience for me in broadcasting as well. Yeah, that's why I started using Twitter 3D. I think hopefully that'll people who do follow can then get the messages a lot better. Although the iOS app does seem to work quite well, and it sort of sits in the background, over on my other desk as the phone, so I just kind of hear it chortling from time to time. I noticed Better Twitch TV isn't picking up the notifications either, so. Dear. Okay, thanks really, William. William, for that. I haven't been in email tonight, so I don't get. Obviously, I don't see them on Twitch. I only see them in email or when I go into Twitter. Which, to be honest, I'm not fantastically a fan of Twitter. Unless you carry a phone around with you, or you run something like TweetDeck permanently on your desktop, it's kind of it sort of is I find it a bit too much trouble to just keep going there and having a look, and even running something on the desktop. I kind of have always got something else as primary focus anyway. So, oops, yeah. Well, I could say it's a good way of getting those emotions out of you, but I don't actually think of them as particularly violent, to be honest. They do all seem to involve lots of sharp objects, though. Even the airbrushing with the sharp needles, chisels with the sharp blades, the dentist drills with the sharp diamond drills. What else have we got? The sewing with the sharp needles, punch graph with the sharp needle, pyrography. Well, I've got a heated knife for it, so I suppose it's got a sharp edge. So lots of sharp things. Yeah, I kind of it's kind of why I well, it was one of the reasons for getting a smartphone was things like that, and yet I don't carry the phone with me when I'm not out. When I'm in the in and around the house, I don't carry the phone, so it's kind of doesn't really serve a lot of purpose. And when I'm out, I'm driving or something like that, so I'm not looking at the phone anyway. To be honest, I don't understand Facebook. I really don't understand it. I mean, I do look at some people on it and a couple of organisations, but I kind of really don't. No, I don't. I kind of don't. I get the concept, I guess, of Facebook, but the way in which it's going, I don't really get the principle of it. I mean, it's almost just like a. It's almost just like a version of Twitter, really, but with pictures. I think I don't know, for the art stuff, something is it? In fact, I was actually looking at an article on at work the other day for which was talking about shops and things like that and use of stuff like Facebook and for promoting business. And there was a lot of talk about Facebook is yeah, it's a good idea to have a Facebook, but it's not a primary method of selling things. And I'm trying to think. It was one of the picture sharing sites which was sort of came out as best for business. I don't know if it was Imgur or one of the others. I really can't remember, to be honest. But I might have to try and find the article again. But that sort of was suggested as actually being a better one for business. Because it's more focused on the image and the discussion of the image, whereas Facebook is, I don't know, I can't actually recall what they were saying about it, but one of the comments is Facebook has a real focus on selling you games and things like that, to play on it. There's lots of things on it which distract from what it is that you're trying to say in your marketing message, and therefore something like and I'll say Imgur for the moment because I can't recall which one it was, but there it's it's your picture that you've just put out and the discussion is about your picture, and there isn't distracting stuff around it, so to speak. I think it was Imgur. It certainly wasn't Snapchat that they were talking about. Oh, mine sits in my pocket. I don't bother getting it out of my pocket. I mean, it links to the car anyway for the phone itself. But it just sits in my pocket wherever my pocket is. If it's my coat pocket, it's probably on the back seat, and I certainly don't look at it whilst I'm driving at all. But I've kind of got used to that a long time ago. As I mentioned, I am a licensed radio amateur, and I used to have the radios in the car, and I talked to those whilst I was driving. So I used to actually wear a headset for the radios in the car, which was fun at times with the police. And there's something to be said to be driving to work first thing in the morning, talking to somebody in Australia. It's an interesting thing to do. he's not going very well. Sod it. I'll leave it. I'll work on it again later. Yeah, no, it's a good thing. Hey, William. Definitely a good thing. Keep it away. There's no tempting then. I don't even often answer the phone in the car, so when I'm driving, I can do it hands-free, but usually I let it just go to voicemail. Right. Let's see what we're going to do with this dragon. At the centre part, the lowest part is the rock that he stood on. So the body's all essentially proud of that. So that's going to need to go down quite a bit. His head is probably going to be the highest point, I think, looking at it. Now, at the moment though, the wings are sort of out straight. This one curves away a bit, so I'm kind of wondering whether I want to keep them out, this one especially, out straight, or whether I want to curve it down, a bit like an umbrella. I've got a complete choice, of course, at this stage. Yeah, it's easy enough for me. Mind you, bikers can be on phones as well. It's just that they tend to have a headset. I don't know. Just Jessup, I really can't recall which it was. It might have been. I know it wasn't Snapchat. It might have been Instagram, or it could have been Imgur. Instagram, I think, does have the ability to have text around the picture, isn't it? Imgur is more just sharing pictures. So. What Free's potentially on about as well is it's not necessarily being, well, it's a good idea to be careful around all of the road users, bikers and cars as well. I suspect Free is probably more on about people pulling out, like from junctions and things. That's the worst one for bikers. It's not great to sideswipe one, but that's probably the most dangerous thing for a biker is somebody pulling out and either hitting them in the side at that point or them going into the side of the car, because then they're just catapulted down the road at speed. But it's not only bikers. You can see it with people who are on the with trucks as well. You've got a 40 foot truck, 30 foot Arctic, and you get somebody who the truck will pull out to turn left, so they have to pull out to come left, and you get a car come down the middle, and the person's on the phone, and you kind of, I don't know, this truck drivers must be expecting it. Yeah, it's amazing how many people look but don't see. You can see people turn the head and look left and right, but they just don't see, because they don't expect to see. They don't see, and your perceptions are often driven by what you expect to see. You can be fooled by the speed of them, but yeah, Oh, and well, I mean, the other thing about we're now into car drivers, and the other thing with things like buses and trucks is the people that will pull up to it. You know, you got a road and a junction, and there's a bus or a truck waiting to come in, and you'll get somebody who pulls right up to the junction, and then sort of flashes the lights to let them pull in, if you like, and the poor truck driver's going, yeah, but I want to be over there to pull in here. You're in the way. and then they get, you know, the car driver. You can see him getting all irate because the truck will just sit there because he can't do anything else. Same with the buses, and they get all irate and they blow the horn, and eventually they'll pull out and just go. You know, lose patience, and it's real. I find it real fun if I see there's a truck or a bus coming in, and I'm sort of next in line, if you like. I will hang back about 10 feet from the junction, and you can almost see the relief on the driver's face, because the first thing most of them do is they'll just say, "Yeah, great, thanks." It's quite good fun. Uh, it's a funny one, is that just, Jessup, because it's a relatively safe thing to them to do, because if you're talking about standing traffic, but it's not a great thing for them to do, but it is a relatively safe thing for them to do. It's when they start weaving between the cars, you know, coming across the front of you, and doing that between the lanes, that it becomes a real problem. Hmm. What you can only do it in queues though, free, because it's deemed to be, as you say, filtering. If it's at speed, so you're not queuing, then it's overtaking on the inside. Anyway, so head is top. That's going down. So head wants to be a bit proud looking at it there. Wings, they're curving upwards a bit actually towards the tip. Not sure I want to do that. Not sure I want to do that. And maybe bring them out and then take this tip and sort of just bring the sides down, maybe. I think. Yeah, so let's block cut this down a little bit from about the neck, I think, here down the body, and we'll drop down the rock as well that he stood on, a little bit. So we've got different levels of rock. His feet are there. He stood on the rock on both sides. That really wants to be fairly close to the background, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it in stages. Okay, let's start around this side here with some stop cuts. Approximating the curve I want here, so I can go in later with a curved edge, so I'm slightly proud of the lines I want to be at. This foot's going to be an awkward one as well, because the feet are thin. I'll do that is I'll just go across here. Let's do it in. Now let's just see what's going to happen here. That's going to be a bit dangerous. I'm going to do it this way, I think. If I push that way, I'm likely to break off somewhere around here. Now I know I want to go fairly close down, so it wouldn't be too bad, but I have no control over what happens, and it could go all the way, and it might be recoverable, it might not, and ultimately the recovery bit, if it gets cut too low, is to go, I'll just cut the whole thing off and just go down to the background. But again, you can only go so far in saying, I've made a mistake, I'll take that whole thing away, because ultimately you're just left with the back plane. I suppose you could always carve something else then and stick it on, but so what I'm doing here is carving across the grain of the wood. But even though I'm carving across, it can still dip down, so I still have to watch the fact that whether I get the chisel dragged in. And here's things like a split. That's come up of its almost of its own accord, but as you might be able to see, it stops at the stop cut, which is what the idea of the stop cut is. So that little piece of wood split, but it stopped here. It didn't come into this bit of wood. So with a bit more confidence, and I haven't been carving basswood for a while, I could probably go at this quite strongly and take quite a big chunk, but I'm a little bit wary about it. And actually, I shouldn't carve off the edge like that. If you can avoid it, don't carve off an edge, because you'll tend to break the wood away. Now I do need to extend that stop cut further down. Yeah, I agree with that, Free. I thought a lot of schools had driving education as part of the curriculum. Well, I guess I've been around for more than 15 years, so it always seemed like a good idea to me. Right. I've never taken a bike license myself. Just the usual. Well, I say usual Free, but you probably know what I mean. The moped license, but as a learner, so I never actually took the test in that either, because I've been driving since I was about 14. But I used to drive a tractor, so the car wasn't particularly difficult. You just rules of the road really for the car. So I took a driving license, car lessons, and and a car test virtually as soon as I could at 17.5. Oh, I don't know, something like a big Harley free. You could do with the reverse gear on some of those. But no, yeah, he's right, William. No need to reverse park a bike. In fact, technically you can't, because a bike can't go backwards under its own power. Well, not unless somebody's installed the gearbox backwards. In fact, that used to be one of the definitions of a motorbike in the UK, was it did not have a reverse gear. And so you could drive three-wheeler cars in the UK on a bike licence at one point. I don't know if you still can. Because they were classed as a motorbike, because they had no reverse gear. And if you change the gearbox to one with the reverse gear, the very same vehicle was suddenly a car and not a bike. Yeah. Now the Goldwings I like, with the shaft drive and nice cruising bike, but not, yeah, not especially a fun bike, I guess, but yeah, that's not saying much, eh, William? I mean, with only 3 examples. Yeah. I wouldn't actually like to say whether it's easier or harder. To be honest, it's a bit of a difficult thing to answer. But if you're in the UK and you can drive, a useful thing to try and do is to take the advanced driving test. That really does test roadcraft. Well, I was about to say the advanced driving test isn't really about control of the vehicle. It is about control of the vehicle and about how you control it, but it's not about the mechanics of pressing gears in the right order or anything like that. And in fact, the advanced driving test expects you not to use the gears in the right order. Okay, yeah, I'm sure that's actually fascinating for you. It's always with things like that. There's so much that people think is a law and isn't. And yeah, I've had the odd discussion with a policeman like that. Not a traffic cop, because the traffic cops do know their law, but had the odd when I used to have the radios in the car. The headset I wore had only one earpiece, because it's actually illegal. It was at the time to have to wear a headset, or it would be illegal now, for example, to have earbuds in. You have to have a free ear in order to be able to hear the environment. And I've had that discussion with a fair few number of policemen. I actually would recall one discussion. Nearly one Christmas, I was in the middle of town, and a police car had been following me for a little while, and I knew I was going to get stopped, and came to a quiet set of traffic lights, and a policeman got out of the car, came over, and was he'd seen the radio. Well, he'd seen the headset on, and CB radio was around at the time, and he thought I'd got CB radio in the car, but it was still illegal in the UK to have CB radios. And he picked up the mic, and I grabbed it out of his hand and said, "You can't have that," because he was what he was about to do is to talk on it to see whether it was CB or not, which was interesting, because if it was CB and he talked on it, it'd have been making an illegal act. But as an amateur radio, he didn't hold a license, and therefore it would have been illegal. So I had to explain to him that, whilst he might want to, whilst he couldn't arrest me because it wasn't CB radio, I would be in breach of civil law if I'd let him use the radio. But once he realised what it was, I then spent the next 20 minutes talking about amateur radio with him, which was quite funny because he was then interested in the thing. Oh dear. Oh, I didn't know that about 16. It kind of makes sense, does that? But I didn't realise that. No. And I agree with you about the skid pan as well. I've been on one. Oh, okay. Well, I've no idea, I won't bother repeating it. But the skid pan's an interesting one. I've been on a skid pan, and it's well, I can say you learn a lot in an awfully short period of time about how to control a vehicle where it's out of control. Whenever I get a new car, I like it in winter when there's a lot of snow about, because I'll go onto an empty car park and throw the car around just to see how it reacts and how to control it. You're likely to roll it more than anything, William, unless you've had training to operate at speed. It's not as easy as the games will lead you to believe. Roya123, welcome to the studio this evening. What I'm doing is carving out relief carving out a dragon. So this is the dragon's body with the wings, and he's actually stood on a rock. I've cleared out the background over about the past 2 weeks, and now we're actually starting to carve the shape of the dragon itself. So this is kind of blocking out. So I'm sort of just trying to set myself some levels. So this which is the rock wants to be quite close to the base. His tail, etc., will also be fairly, not as low, but fairly low down. The head is the highest point, so I'm just sort of getting things to an approximate shape, and then I'll start to do, once that's done, start to do final shaping and curves and things like that. Yeah, no, don't do it in your own car. You damage your tyres if nothing else. CB radio? No, not CB radio. Amateur radio. There is a significant difference. In most countries, you need to take exams in order to operate amateur radio. CB radio, at most, you just go and buy a license. Usually on things like skid pans as well, they use cars with bolt tyres. Yeah. 90 in a straight line, though, is a heck of a lot different, William, to 90 round a corner. I think I mean, the Scandinavian countries and those which drive, regularly in snow, they just that wasn't quite what I wanted to do. So a bit of a mistake there. Raya123, thank you very much for following the studio. That is most kind of you. I'm glad you're enjoying what you're seeing, and also thank you for that awesome comment. That's great. Yeah, I mean the whole Scandinavian countries, they're driving on ice, a large proportion of the year, and manage it quite easily. And in the UK, you get drivers who can't drive if there's a couple of probably a couple of snakes would have a problem, but a couple of flakes of snow, and you get traffic jams and all sorts. Sorry about the wobbling camera. I will see if I can do something about it for the next stream. Oh, I think we've got waiting lists about that as well, but William, but what is amateur radio? Technically, amateur radio is a means for education in the transmission of information, and I forgot what it exactly is, but it's couched in terms of a means by which you can learn and educate yourself in radio transmission techniques and applications, and equipment. But you're familiar with, if you like, if to put it on a simple basis, if you're familiar with CB radio, then amateur radio is a similar sort of idea in that you can buy equipment, but for amateur radio you can make your own, for example, which you can't do with CB radio. And we also have a lot more frequencies available to us, anything from very, very low frequency stuff, and I'm trying to think of the actual bands, but sort of 100 kilohertz, so you're not much above audio really, all the way up to bands that operate at something like 50 gigahertz, which is at least 5 times higher in frequency than most microwave ovens. And amateur radio, we get involved, or we can do television broadcasting. We do electronic communications, so anything from old teleprinters to what they call slow scan television, fax type transfers, modern communications technology like digital voice, satellites. There are quite a few amateur satellites up in the in Earth orbit, actually in low Earth orbit, but they're still in Earth orbit. What else gets involved? Well, it's really difficult to say, because anything that involves communications you can sort of get involved with for amateur radio. But in most countries, and certainly in the UK, you have to pass. Now it's an exam, or it's actually more than one exam, because we now have intermediate licenses. But don't think you have to learn Morse code anymore for the what used to be called the A-class license. It takes a fair bit of study, even now with multiple choice questions, to be able to pass and operate. Yeah, William's not done a hill start before, not in snow. Ah, dear. Yeah. I tell you, it's free. Sometimes four wheels and four-wheel drive and snow doesn't always go well together. I have skidded 20 yards, and I was travelling slow, William. I ended up sideways, having bounced over a curb, and I came to rest in against a hedge, which slowed the car down. So I actually had absolutely no damage whatsoever to the car, but I was only doing about 15 miles an hour, and the car lost. It was a four-wheel drive car, and I lost traction. It was solid ice, with snow over the top as it happens. But you know, it isn't a case of just going slow. There's a whole thing about smooth driving, smooth gear changes, smooth driving, and a whole lot of observation. Oh, I didn't. I haven't been keeping up with it, Free. That's a lot of the CubeSats, I think they're being called. A lot of schools get involved in it for education purposes, and so the licensed amateurs get involved with the schools because they can communicate with the satellites, or they already have the equipment to be able to receive them, because a lot of them generate quite a bit of telemetry of experiments and things like that, which can be interesting. Best way, if you can learn to drive in bad conditions, good conditions are a lot easier. Don't think of it as being bad. Just Jessup, think of it as having an advantage over the other idiots that are on the road. And yes, everybody else on the road is an idiot. Yeah, somewhat similar around here, William. Well, of course, you're not that far away, but again, don't car off the edge. So I'm coming in from this edge and just creating a chamfer. Then I can carve from the other side, because it's a bit of an awkward angle to work at. I'm driving this with my fingers, not my arms, so the chisel won't go flying off anyway. Have you noticed, Free, whenever that happens, there's always a program on television of you know, of people, you know, like in, I don't know, the gritters in Scotland or something like this that are driving, ploughing through 3 foot of snow and stuff like that, and yet in your area, wherever your area is, they're not out because it's too slippy. Junior was fine. It was Junior would not have been the one that was injured, but now he's you know, the fact that he stayed on the desk basically. He took a little bit of a huff, but the fact that he stayed on the desk meant he was perfectly fine with it. And in fact, this afternoon, whilst I've been at work, he's been sat on my knee, so he's not taken umbrage at it at all. I'm not sure he'll visit the stream tonight, but in case anybody's wondering what just Jessup was on about there, Junior is a pussycat. In fact, he's that pussycat, and he was the model for this particular picture, and he likes to sit on my knee just here, but he quite often will visit the stream. He'll just come and disturb everything. And the other night he actually came and sat basically here, just to the side of the carving, and I tried to pick him up to basically to sit him somewhere else so that he could carry on carving, and he objected. And the way he usually objects is to try and put his teeth on you. It doesn't actually usually close them, but he just puts his teeth around to sort of say, you know what, go away. And of course, you never know what he's actually going to do, and the natural reaction, of course, is just to move away. And I moved my hands really quickly, so I beat him to the space. I didn't hit him. He went to bite me. I moved my hand quicker than he was, but I hit the lamp, which is lighting up the desk here, with a real clatter. And as I say, he took huff at that point, and I went and sat behind my monitor. What work do I do? I work for a telecommunications company, and I do various data analytics stuff. Mainly to do with product sales. Well, that's what I'm doing at the moment. I generally get quite lucky in that I end up being able to do more or less what I want to do. But lots of spreadsheets, lots of databases, and analysing numbers and trends and things like that. Yeah. Yeah, the snowplow trains. Yeah, I can imagine that would have been funny. Yeah, with Bernard. Listen, so good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. That's nice of you to join. Nope, that's not something I've heard about. Do you want me to seriously, guys? Do you want me to transfer the camera to a tripod? Because I can do that. Fluffy Squad 1, good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. Thank you for dropping in. Are you just watching, or do you have an interest in art yourself or crafts? No, I kind of understand what a paddleboard was, Lizard. I haven't been following SpaceX or anything at all. So I wasn't even aware they were getting as far as actual implementation tests. Okay, well, for tomorrow, I'll try and move the snake. Just if I tilt this, I can show you. There's that metal snake that's here is what the camera's mounted on, and of course it's quite a long snake, so it is obviously bouncing like a giant spring, really. And I'll try and put it on a place to the side of me for tomorrow. See if that's any better. I like it better than a tripod because it's not, whilst it's right in front of me, it's not obscuring the screen, so I can see things like the reference picture a lot better, and you get a more of the same view as I do with this, rather than looking off from one side. That's good, Fluffy Scott. Sketching, pencil sketching, I assume you mean by that. Or do you mean like computer-based electronic sketching? Anything in particular like sketching, or is it just whatever takes your fancy? Well, that sounds quite slow these days. With what is it, the Tesla Roadster, which does something like 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds. Ah, okay. Well, of course, SpaceX is commercial, isn't it? If I remember rightly. Pencil. Oh, okay. That's good, Fluffy Squad. Something I don't do a lot of isn't sketching. I've got I kind of like doing it, but I don't do a lot of it. I kind of don't like to waste the paper. Got this weird thing. I don't, unless I can find a subject that is worth doing, I don't like to waste the paper, so I don't do as much as I should. It's a weird thing, which the stream is helping with, because you know, I need to find subjects to do all the various crafts with, and you know, previously if I wasn't streaming I'd be going things like, oh no, I'll wait for a better whatever image, etc. Fluffy Squad 1, thank you very much for following the studio. It is really kind of you, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying what you see. We do other things as well, other crafts as well. So whilst we're carving at the moment, we'll be doing some pyrography once this piece is finished, and then scraper board. We may do some other bits and pieces at weekends as well for odd streams. Is SpaceX got anything to do with was it Rotan? I have got a half a feeling that they're linked in some way, or are they completely different organisations? Right, well I think the depth of that will probably do for the moment. We'll do a bit more of the space around the legs and things, and then we can decide a bit more on the where the body will go. Oh, that's good, Fluffy. It's a great thing to do, to be able to do, is that just sketch anything that you see. Really, I envy you the ability to do that. Tail's going to bother me. We'll have to be a bit careful with the tail here, because it's so thin. I could end up snapping it off. Now just around here there's kind of 2 or 3 levels. You know, it's a pinnacle of a rock, and the dragon is stood on some of it, so I've got multiple heights in the rock itself. In fact, where's my pencil gone? Oh yes, my pencil got borrowed. So let's have another one. The lines just need a bit of darkening, because with running my hands over the wood as I'm carving it, I start to rub out the marks. there is another foot just there, but I might not bother putting that foot in. It wouldn't be particularly detrimental to the piece if it wasn't there. Either that lizard solo is just after a big profit. Oh, cool, Fluffy. Vehicles can be surprisingly difficult to sketch. Well, at least I think so. I kind of find organic things somewhat easier when I sketch, even though I actually like sketching vehicles. I'm not sure there is a big picture being designed anywhere, Lizard Soul. There may well be individuals that have a vision like that, but I'm not sure there is a concerted thing in society to do that. Lizard Soul not needing the money doesn't always is often not a driver for these people. Making a profit is, but not the actual money itself, because the making of the profit is a success. As you say, as you're intimate, they've got more than enough money. They don't need the money, but it's the success which drives them. And success is measured by the amount of profit. In college you took classes and learnt a lot of stuff. Oh, cool. Other than mandatory art classes, I've never actually taken any formal training, but it's can always be a good idea to do so. Okay, I don't know the guy at all, so I'm not. And my advice for you would be to take some pain tablets now, rather than waiting till it gets worse. But there again, I get migraines, so that's what I'd be doing. Get rid of it before it develops. Now, if I'd have thought about actually carving this piece before I actually started carving this piece, I wouldn't have put the tail here. I'd have taken the tail out down that side. It would have made it a heck of a lot easier to carve, especially in this area here. I've got some very restricted spaces and angles, quite acute angles to try and get chisels into. which will prove to be a challenge to get a nice clean result. Maybe. Sometimes it's a challenge. But, there's all sorts of drivers for people doing things. Lizard Soul, you could be perfectly correct. It can be a combination of all sorts of things, It it kind of reminds me of, for some reason I don't quite know why, but in English literature classes at school, there would be usually something like the class would be assigned a poem, and what you'd have to do is interpret the poem to be and say what was on the mind of the author at the time. What image they were trying to portray, and all this sorts of stuff. And sometimes you did living poets, and I kind of really wish that one day somebody would go to one of these poets and go, what were you thinking about when you wrote this? Were you really trying to do X, Y, or Z? And have one of them come back and say, nah, I just like the words. Right, I think this chisel could do with a little bit of a sharpen up. It's starting to be a little bit difficult to make the stop cuts. It's not so bad the shaving at the moment, but we'll sharpen it up before it gets any less than it is now. I won't say any less sharp or or more blunt, because it's not fantastically blunt. It's not. I'd still easily cut myself on it if I wasn't careful, but. Yeah, that's it. Bunny Mox Rose, good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. Anybody who's watching isn't sure about what I'm about to do. I said I'm going to sharpen a chisel. Whilst it will come away sharper, I'm not doing what most people would think of as sharpening, which is taking it to a sharpening stone. These tools and the level of sharpness that I want, that's on here already, and that I want, that would be quite a coarse method of sharpening. Essentially what I'm going to be doing here is polishing the edge, and the polishing does take off metal just like a stone would do, because it's the polishing, what the stuff you saw me put on is a polish, so it is a mild abrasive, and it does leave metal behind, because that's what the black is that you see on the leather here, and if you can see shiny, that's metal deposits, very tiny fragments of it. And so I am actually sharpening the blade. I'm holding it at the right angle. I'm holding it on the cutting face, so it's not flat down. It's at an angle, and that angle is the correct correct angle, if you like. I can feel when it's flat, and I'm just holding it at that and dragging it backwards. When you're hand sharpening like this, you don't go sideways, because you can't actually hold the chisel at the correct angle to do that, and it doesn't actually give you the right profile on the edge. So you drag chisels backwards, and always backwards, never forwards, because that would just cut into your material. So you drag backwards, and in doing this, what I'm also doing is the edge, there's an edge being created and that edge is curling up, and if I then just now go and try and cut wood with it, it would seem to be very blunt because of that curled edge. It's like trying to push a wide area through the wood. So what I'm about to do is turn it over and basically sharpen or straighten out that curl, and then I'll get a really sharp edge. So just a couple of backward strokes. I don't need to sharpen this edge as such. All the sharpening is being done on this side here, and I can also tell that I've done it quite well because this cutting face is now really shiny. And in fact, if you get it close enough, and I can't do it with the camera, you can actually see the edge has a very fine colour to it. I can see almost a rainbow. I can see red and yellow, and that tells me exactly. I can see therefore exactly where the edge of the blade is. I can see there's no nicks or anything in it as well, which is an interesting thing. Oh, never mind, Bunny Mox Rose, thank you for dropping in. Right, this thing is now significantly sharper. I can feel it, and I can shave very fine levels of wood off. So that was effective. And I can feel the difference now in the stop cuts as well. They're going deeper than they were before. Now I'm pushing against this, and the wood isn't cutting. It isn't shaving. Effectively, the wood is telling me I'm doing something wrong. I mean, I could apply more force and it would eventually go through, but what's happening is there's something about the wood, the texture, the grain pattern, where me trying to push against it at that particular point was the wrong thing to do. I'd probably end up tearing the wood rather than cutting it. So one of the skills you develop as you learn more about carving is the ability to feel that. Feel when applying extra pressure is the wrong thing to do. There'll be something like a slight change of grain direction in just in that particular area there. There is somewhere around on this wood, I can't remember where it is now, there is another area like that which caused some interesting challenges, shall we say, in removing the background. So how's Adi getting on? Jessup, I can see you're probably still watching his chat. In case anybody's wondering, that doesn't know who I was referring to there. There's a gentleman called Adi Fall Guy who is currently streaming at the moment. And on Wednesdays he streams himself making chainmail jewellery. Today he's actually making himself a shop or a stall sign out of chainmail. which he's been doing for a little while now. It's got something like about 14,000 rings in it, everyone placed by hand. So he does some amazing work, always worth checking out. And whilst we're talking about other people that are on stream, if you've been around a little bit, you'll have seen 3D Bloke. 3D Bloke is an airbrush artist. He also paints with normal paint brushes occasionally, using acrylic or airbrush paint. I'm assuming he uses the same paint. He's been doing some airbrush work recently, monochrome, white on black, with his latest piece being Xenomorph, which he's still working on, but I believe tonight he's going for a departure. He's going to use some canvas, canvas textured paper, and going with something freehand out of his imagination. So that probably will be a stream that will start soon, within about another quarter of an hour or so, because Free normally starts his streams at around about 10 o'clock UK time, which I say is about a quarter of an hour from now. So if he's listening to me at this moment in time, he'll suddenly be going, oh, and starting to run around to move his monitor and keyboard and camera. So 15-minute warning, sir. Normally I finish around about 10 o'clock at night, and I then tend to go and watch Free myself, but this evening I've had a special request to go on a little bit longer, so I'll probably be going on till about 10:30 tonight. So that's about another 3/4 of an hour. Okay, in this area here, I've got restricted access really because of the shapes. So it doesn't really matter how far I want to go down on this area at this side here. I can only go so far, and if I want to go further, I'll have to wait until I've done some carving of the dragon's body. I don't think I've said it on the stream tonight, but for anybody that's kind of new to carving, you see all these shavings that were basically stuck to the wood, and don't pull them off. Cut them off. If you pull them off, you're likely to tear the wood or even break it off sometimes, and you're likely to tear off an area that you didn't want to tear off. And so if you develop the habit, I mean, whilst I'm doing rough cutting, it possibly wouldn't be a problem, but if you develop the good habit of always cutting it off, when you finish carving, you definitely don't want to accidentally tear off a piece of wood and cause a damage. So if you develop the good habits and use them all the time, you won't accidentally do it at the wrong time. Okay, so we leave that there. I will be going a bit further, well, a lot further down than that, but for the moment that will do. I think I'll do a little bit now around the foot here and the sort of the next level of the rock. It's kind of a pinnacle, so it's sort of rounded, but rough and a bit untidy rock wise. Again, I'm keeping away from the tail bit itself. I'm going to try and keep it that thin as it is here, but I really don't want it to break off at all. When I come to carve it, I may well carve it thicker, which I don't think will be particularly detrimental to the piece at all, so I may well do that just for longevity of the piece. because otherwise it will potentially be very easy to break off when it's being handled. I think you must have repainted that that head now about 5 or 6 times, Free. If it wasn't a commissioned piece, I'd probably have said something like, maybe you should get a different angle for it. I think there's something about the angle that's just not gelling with you just at the moment. That you just can't get something that you're comfortable with. I hope your headache goes away, Free, and they're not nice things to have. I'm guessing that may well be Free who started his stream up in advance of going live, but in case you heard the chortle, that was my phone, probably with somebody on Twitch that I follow going live, and judging by the time, I assumed it would be Free. Oh, yeah. Okay, well, this isn't quite down to that depth there, but that's fine because I could take this down further, but now I'm just leaving the line there, so I know that I want this higher than this, even though they both have to go down even further. And then I'm now going to do a little bit more around the tail here. This is kind of the third level of depth. Of the rock that the dragon is stood on. Again, I'm not going to do into all the around the fine details here. That will be a lot easier to do once I get closer to final depth. And again, this will just be a fairly shallow cut, because I want this to remain above this level, just so that I know that that's what I want to happen in the end. And then I'll carve everything down together. Stop cuts around here are relatively important, especially as I'm going at an angle, because if I start driving the corners into the area of the tail, then what will happen is if I'm doing it in the depth of the final tail position, I'll have kind of like lots of marks in the tail from the edge of the chisel, which won't look very good. Or I'll have to make the tail thinner to carve them out. So the stop cut helps that enormously, because I can feel as I'm cutting where the stop cut actually is. There we go. That fragment didn't want to cut loose. Again, I'm just rough cutting this. It's not final cuts. So like the background ideally is. So this is, yeah, not too bothered about it being flat or having ridges in or things like that. This is really, again, still removing waste wood, but we're now removing it from the important part of the carving, if you like. Because this, when it gets down to depth, will be part of the final result. It will be the rock that Ruth here is stood on. That's the name of the dragon, by the way. It's not one I've made up. The dragon is based on the image you see at the bottom left, and that image is drawn by, or is painted by a guy called Michael Wheland, who is an illustrator. He was a favourite illustrator of a novelist, or a science fiction novelist called McCaffrey, because he was the one to best illustrate, if you like, or understand her vision for what the dragons should look like, and he got it right. But this dragon, as you can see in the image, is white. There's only one white dragon in any of the books that Anne McCaffrey wrote about a science fiction world called Pern, and that dragon is called Ruth. So I know this one is Ruth. If it was any other colour, I wouldn't know, but this one is unique. The legend Seda, good evening. Welcome back to the studio. Thank you for dropping in again tonight. That's fantastic. Now, normally you'd have just been arrived in time for the end of the stream, but as it happens tonight, I'm going on a little bit longer, till about past, so about another half hour. Okay, so we've got some levels established here. Dragon's head is the biggest, or the most prominent, so the whole body needs to go down. This is kind of the bit of carving, a relief that I'm not fantastically always very happy with, because at this point I start to lose my drawing and I have to keep putting it back in, because as soon as I carve a piece of wood away, like down here for example, I'm going to lose the drawing. So it's something I have to watch when I do. Dear. Dragon's head isn't that much, so probably the backbone's got to go down a bit. So I'm working out the levels. I'm looking at a larger reference picture just to help me understand the structure of the dragon as drawn. And it's kind of like a large version of like a mouse or a lizard body, if you like. So the wings come out from the side of the body, they're not on the back of the body. But the way he's stood on the rock, he's kind of with his back arched a little bit. So, okay, well, where's my pencil gone? So, just going to mark in where the body is around here. So that's the wing, but then the body is sort of, wing joins the tail, so the body is sort of in this sort of area here. Kind of odd trying to draw sideways. That's the wing. So that's the neck there with the head. Yeah, so that's probably a bit thicker there. Comes around down there to the tail, and that's where the wings join the body. There's almost a hint, if you like, of the wings doing that, but they don't actually come across the back. And then there's the backbone here. So I know the wings aren't as high as the backbone, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these wing what would be the wing membranes, drive them down a little bit here first, and then we'll just see how we go from there. We've got the arm, because this is on the style of like lizards or flying bats. So you got an arm, and then the hands basically are, and the fingers are what support the wing membranes. Fall Guy, good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. Did you manage to finish your the white area of your sign this evening? Whilst I had your stream on, I obviously was watching what I'm doing more than your stream. Let's put some stop cuts in. I'll go along the arm at the moment. Actually, I'll do that from the other side. So I'm just cutting a chamfer, or a chamfer, depending on how you pronounce it, to the stop cut on both sides. Then I can carve away from that. And in case anybody is worried, seeing me hold this chisel and cutting towards myself, I'm doing it in a safe manner. The rule that you're possibly thinking of is never cut towards yourself, and whilst that's an extremely good rule, it's actually a guideline. It's a guideline which is being developed for beginners, really, because beginners who are using a chisel like this are quite likely to hold it and use their arms to pull the chisel. And if you do that, you've got a very good chance of sticking it in yourself. If it pops out of the wood unexpectedly, especially if you've been using a lot of force, you are quite likely to stab yourself if you're not careful. It's quite hard to do, but it depends on how close you get to the piece of work. What I'm doing differently is I'm resting my arms on the table, which means that, well, apart from the fact this is a non-slip mat, but it means that it's really hard to pull with my arms, and so I don't. I'm holding the chisel with one hand, and I'm driving it either by holding the blade or holding my hand, but I'm driving it with my left hand and the fingers. So all I'm doing is pushing with my fingers. So my right hand is stabilizing the chisel, my left hand is pushing the chisel, and because I'm pushing with my fingers, I can only go so far. And that so far is nowhere near me, and also is not a lot of force. So I stand very little chance of actually getting in contact with myself with a blade in the wrong place. The other thing you'll notice is my wrists are well out of the way. It's not like I'm doing it like this, or they're both to one side. You've still got another stream's worth of, that's one thing I've kind of found. It's really hard. I find it really hard to estimate how many. If somebody says how many streams are you going to be doing this carving, for example, I find it really hard to estimate how long it's going to be. This area of wood here is quite hard compared to the rest of the wood. Maybe it'll get a bit softer once I get the surface off of it. You ran out of. Well, as you said, you now know exactly how many are left. For anybody that's watching that doesn't know and hasn't caught me mentioning it before this evening, 84 Guy makes some very, very nice jewellery from chainmail. He also does other similar related things like key rings and bag charms and small bags for dice and basically anything else that bracelets, necklaces that chainmail can be made into, and it's some really nice stuff. I can attest to that, having seen it in person since I bought some. So Eddie is definitely worth checking out. He generally streams chainmail on Wednesday evenings, and occasionally at other times as well. But highly recommend you follow him, check him out the next time he's doing chainmail. Boxing Man 492, welcome to the studio. Good evening. Thank you for dropping in. In fact, Eddie makes working with chainmail look so easy. He's tempted me to try it, which means I know it's not easy. It's nowhere near as easy as it looks, but I'm going to have a go at some point. So although ADF started what would be called a finish carving, I'm nowhere near finished. This is kind of just blocking out depths, and then we'll work from there to the fine level of carving needed for the final piece. But to try and answer that seriously, let's see. Let's see how good I get. Boxing Man 492, thank you very much for following the studio. That is really kind of you. I'm glad you're enjoying the content. Do other things as well. So it's not always carving, but we do pyrography, scraper board, and something called punchcraft as well from time to time. Carving does tend to take the most time though. So how long? There's going to be at least another week doing this. I think that's about 10 hours, by the way, people. A week sounds an awfully long time, but I only generally stream for about 2 hours at a time. I probably expect about another 20 hours, Eddie, on this. That's added to about the 20 hours that have already been done. I'm not a particularly fast carver. I am relatively speaking, a beginner carver. So, people who have got a lot more experience could certainly be doing this a lot faster than I am. But the only way to gain experience is to actually do it, which means doing it at the speed I'm doing it at. Okay, stop cuts required. In fact, we'll cut these off here. I'm going to do in carving this, I think, is use a technique which is start to carve it as I go. So rather than sort of saying, oh, I want this to be a particular height, cut it down to that height and go. I think what I'm going to do is carve it as I go along. So carve the shapes here, start to carve the body, for example. I obviously won't get very far because I've not got a lot of depth, but gradually then carve everything. So I've got to work over the whole piece, gradually lowering it down until it's at the final depth I'm happy with, and I've carved the full item. That way what I'll be able to do is maintain all the shapes and lines and basically be able to see where I'm carving. I'm not fantastically good at redrawing once I start to get a three-dimensional shape. I kind of find it hard to keep redrawing on the piece. Not great trying to draw a three-dimensional picture on a three-dimensional object. So if I carve it as though this is a finished element, and I then just need to lower it, at least that will be easier for me. $604. Once you've been bandying numbers around though, like 14,000 rings, AD, 604 doesn't sound like a lot. It sounds like you're almost finished. How do I want to? Okay, this membrane. Okay, the membranes are fairly tight. Got to remember that. So there's not going to be a lot of sag, and he's not in flight, so you won't get a lot of the sort of ballooning that you might get. But it's rather like an umbrella spokes, so that you do get some. So if, if that was the spoke of an umbrella, and that would be, you get a dip out between them, just because they're that tight. Another stream in the pattern section should be done. Okay. And then of course you've got your tube across the top to do in the bed. I tell you what I was surprised at, because the kits have arrived and at least one of them I picked because it got lots of colour in it. Just how colourful the rings actually are. Kind of used to, with buying like cottons and things like that, pictures on the internet shops of the colours are often more vibrant than they turn out to be in practice, shall we say. Probably as a means of the photography, but I've been rather surprised that the rings are actually as colourful as they look. Okay. So that's going to be a high point where the finger is. So I shall just carve downwards from there towards the elbow. Again, folks, I'm driving this with my fingers. By the way, when I said it was, like a rule for beginners, it kind of is. That's not getting at beginners in any way. We all begin. It's kind of like as a beginner, you've got such a lot to think about that couching something like that as a rule makes it a lot easier just to, not have to explain all the circumstances when you can do it without being, without putting yourself in danger. of course, once you start, have developed skill, like driving a car, for example, there's lots to learn when you first start driving. But as you once you pass your test, if you like, a lot of what your driving is almost automatic. You know how to change your gear. You just go ahead and do it. You don't sort of think through all the steps. And that's the same with carving. As you develop the skill, you don't start to think anymore about grain necessarily, or the 101 other things you think about. And then you can then apply, look at the rules, which are now guidelines, and understand when to use them. Still haven't fully decided how I want these wings to be, whether they're going to be sort of with his arms right back, or whether he's got his arms curled forward. What did I get? I got a bracelet and a necklace. I'll get them and I'll show you. So there's the Byzantine weave for the bracelet, and I quite like the colours, so I'll probably end up doing the purple with the gold connectors. I kind of like the purple colour more than I like the gold colour. But there's the rings, folks, and a flat box. Again, lots of colour. I think my wife would quite like the lots of colour, and so do I, to be honest. And I know she's probably going to want once I make these and give her to them on her birthday. I think she's going to be wanting lots more. But yeah, just lots of colour there in those rings, and just get not quite the light really shines off them, but I'm just trying to get rid of the glare. There's some beautiful colours in there. I don't know if these are sewn rings or... Yeah, I think they are. I think they look like sewn rings. I shall just put them away, just a second. So remember, guys, no mentioning it when she's around. Oh, thank you, Eddie. I don't know how challenging they're going to be, but I'm kind of not daunted by the challenge. Right, let's do a bit around here. That's the wing membrane. That's the okay. Let's do the edge of the wing membrane first. And do around the leg. I may try and do them on Saturday afternoon. So you guys may this weekend may see me on stream seeing whether I make a mess of it or not. I'm not going to promise to be around though. Now getting into this is going to be interesting. I can do some of it by carving chamfers from side to side like this. And I may have to do those, get out a little tiny gouge just to get into the corners. Okay. Really tight spot to get into. Ultimately, there probably won't be, well, there won't be a lot of difference between his leg and this, which is the again part of the underlying rock. So as it gets carved down, I don't need to get really deep because I can maintain the separation between the two. I shall endeavour not to. I think it's going to be a case of it's going to be an interesting case, Hades. That wouldn't dremeling be way easier? It's not so much a self-imposed challenge, AD. Although yes, I would like to just use hand tools to do it. Well, part of it is okay. A Dremel wouldn't be a tool I'd choose for doing this because a Dremel is a relatively low speed tool, and it's therefore not a fantastic tool in that respect, because it's very easy to there isn't as much control with low speed tools like a Dremel. So if I was doing it, I'd be using more high speed tools. So for example, I'd use something like this, which resembles a Dremel, but this is called a micromotor, and it runs at about 38,000 RPM, and it's designed for precision work, so it runs a lot smoother and a lot quieter. Indeed, if I ran this, this microphone's good, so it probably would hear it, but it's a relatively quiet tool to use. If you've ever heard a Dremel running at full speed, it's quite noisy. The other tool that I've got available to use on this wood anyway, because I have a bigger version called a flex shaft, but that's really overkill for this, will be a tool like this. Now this is an air driven tool, and this is actually a dentist, dental equipment actually. It's a dentist drill, although this particular one is used more for technical work, so outside of the mouth rather than inside the mouth. There's too many cavities on this for it really to be used hygienically inside a mouth, but you can actually use dental handpieces for this as well. This runs at something like about 300,000 RPM, and well, if you're probably all familiar with the dentist drill, the whine it gives off, this gives off that sort of whine. It's driven from a compressor. Both of these tools, because of the speed that they run, you can use this very much like a pencil. You can draw with the tool, and the wood just disappears. Whether you're using this, which is a cutter, or you're using a diamond bit, which is abrasive. Both of these tools, especially this one, is extremely good at turning wood into dust. And I don't mean shavings, I literally mean dust. Very fine dust, which you do not want to breathe. It gets everywhere. So what I have is I've got an extractor, an air filtration unit behind me. And whenever I use these, I would use the air filtration unit, because it sucks all the dust away. So I don't breathe it. And I would, generally speaking, also wear a particle mask of some kind. I quite often wear, especially with this tool, I'll wear a vapor mask. So the same sort of mask that I use for painting solvent-based paints or sprays. But whilst the thing itself, the air filtration unit, isn't that noisy, because I've run it on stream and it didn't seem too bad. I can't easily get a camera over there at the moment, and neither can I get a screen over there, so I wouldn't be able to see chat or anything like that, which would mean that I wouldn't really interact with you guys. So you'd see what I was doing, but that would be about it, which I don't know, might be interesting for you. I mean, you might want me to shut up, so I could use that, and I'd generally speaking, I'd have used those tools for getting rid of all the background here, and then I'd have probably been able to do that in, I don't know, half an hour, something like that. And half an hour to an hour to get rid of most of the background. I've not practiced with them enough to be able to do finished carving with it, which would be to take, do the main body of carving. It would make it easier to do fine areas like this, and ultimately I may do that in some areas off camera, just to tidy things up. But one of the things those tools are not really great for, because you're hand holding them, is things like smooth areas, constant depth, without putting one of them into a jig and using it like a router, or I've forgotten the metal equivalent, but like a router in a jig. It's really hard to get a flat background. I mean, this one isn't fantastically flat, but it's a heck of a lot better than those tools will do. And even with them in a jig, you still won't get something as smooth as using a chisel. This thing, I can sand it and it won't actually get much smoother, even with really, like 2000 grit sandpaper. There are some areas like this which haven't worked out yet, which are really rough, but even that's a lot better than those tools will do. I mean, just as an example, where's Mick gone? That micromotor and that bit that you actually saw in the end, that's kind of an example of what was done using that tool, just on the edge there. It doesn't produce a very good edge. So as you can see, it's quite rough and ready, but it wasn't the right tool for doing that anyway, but it did the job, since I couldn't find my saw at the time. Detailing, yes, probably. Things like the eye would be good, although I can also use like a knife for that. The difficulty that you've got with it is, if you take like a pencil, you've got to move in three-dimensional space. So if I want it to carve this with it, and let's pretend it's up here, I've got to move in a three-dimensional space smoothly in order to get detail. Now, if you're talking about just little tiny details like, you know, just flicks or things like this, then yes, you can do that. Or even even maybe just tracing like down the fingers here. I'd be doing in small short marks. So it is perfectly feasible to do. It's not that, you know, you can't do it. My as I say, the main reason is I need to use it over there, and you guys are over here, and I really can't get a camera over at the moment. Maybe later this year I'm hoping to move into a bigger studio, because my studio at the moment is the size of this mat, plus that table behind me. And when I move into a bigger studio, I should then be able to get the camera into a lot more positions, and then I can do that sort of stuff a lot more easily. But that's it as it stands at the moment. So yes, no, it's a reasonable idea. It is. I'm less practiced at it. I mainly use those tools for either glass engraving, which is something I also do, or I will sometimes use them when I'm trying to fully undercut something with the wood, just mainly because it's really hard to get chisels in sometimes to undercut, and yet with those tools, of course, you can do that, and because you're undercutting, it's basically not visible, so I don't have to be as good with them. I need more practice. So at some point I probably will do some full carving using those tools. But yeah, sometimes it's just fun to use chisels. Right, well, I shall do just a tiny bit more here, but I think we're getting towards the end of the stream for tonight. I'm starting to need to have a rest. It's not, you know, carving doesn't need a lot of power or anything like that. It's not like running a marathon and you get really tired sort of thing. It's more to do with there's a lot of really controlled movements. I'm using my fingers here. The sort of the equivalent that AD Fall Guy would be using his fingers to close his jump rings. Whilst you can do it, it's really tiring, and even using the pliers gets tiring after a little while, because your hands just get tired of the gripping, and mine are kind of doing that for a little bit. I need a short rest basically before I would be able to continue carving. You just start to lose power in your fingers and grip, and I'm using sharp tools if you hadn't gathered. And one thing you don't want to do is, if you start losing grip, and power, you start losing control. And that's when tools do things you don't want them to do, including hurt you. So, and I've got about as far down there as I can get with this particular chisel. I'd now have to use a gouge to get in there. But as I say, I'm going to carve this bit of the wing down, and then I'll be able to get further. So it's a stage by stage thing. But I am actually going to call it a night for now. So tomorrow we'll do some more of the wing around here, probably take this down a bit further, and then just generally start to apply shape across the whole piece, as I've started to do here. We're curving down from the finger to the body. The body will get a curve on it, or the start of a curve on it along this edge here, and we'll do the same with each of the wing panels and possibly the tail. And then what I'll do is I'll take the wing panels down a little bit further and take the body down to match it, and we'll just gradually lower the whole piece into onto the background until we get everything to the sort of depth. And one of the advantages of doing that is it means I can sort of experiment a little bit. Do I want his back arched? so it goes lower and then comes up to his tail, or do I want his tail lower and his body up? At some point soon I have to decide how I want his wings. Do I want them sort of back, or do I want them curled forward like this? I've got the two choices really at this stage, and I've got to decide one way or the other. It's unlikely he'll have one curved and one straight. It doesn't seem like a natural position, so I've got to decide, are they up or are they down? But anyway, that's the sort of thing for the future. What I'm going to do now is say thank you to everybody that's followed, and everybody who's watched the stream this evening. It's been absolutely fantastic having you around. Of course, you've got to have an advert, even if Twitch is going to put its own on the end of the stream. So I'm going to do is say, you know, if you've enjoyed what you've seen today, I would appreciate it if you would follow me. But following does have the advantage that, in theory, and I do say theory, Twitch should tell you when I go live. If you don't quite trust it, and the iOS app does seem to be quite good, or maybe the Android version, I'm not sure. But if you don't quite trust it, you can follow me on Twitter @ZoaganArt, or the details are below the stream window. There is a tweet goes out when I start the broadcast, so you'll know I've gone live. That's about the only tweets that I send out, so you're not going to get inundated in case you're worried about that. If, however, you just want to drop in, then you're quite welcome to do so. I generally start streaming around about 8 p.m. In the UK, current UK time. That's British summer time. That's 1900 hours GMT, or if you're not quite sure what the difference is in time zones to where you are, if you simply subtract 2 and 3/4 hours from your current time now, that's when I generally start streaming. It's now 11:15 in the UK, so 2 1/4 hours ago would be 8 p.m. But again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again on a future stream. Good evening.